I'm just trying to move it further away from me because, when it's right next to me, I'm the most loudest, like,
Where's that?
oh, yeah, give me 1 second. Sick kid at home.
No.
I can do that one. Anyway.
I frankly don't know how it appears in this. We're gonna wait for that. All right, so in the continuance, I'll read, making sure that she knows everyone's names, but they're around, so sharp out here. Paul, Shelley, Deb, Nina, Jen, Kelly, and Brian. All right. Yes. All right, well, I was looking at the technology. I sent out the agenda for that week. One of the items on our agenda, always after making sure I got it, going, is that No?
I think we're fine.
Okay. The first item is to move to approve the minutes from the previous meetings. I will be honest, full disclosure, I haven't read them yet, I've had a long week.
They're perfect.
Yeah.
So the choice there to make the motion or to keep, right?
If everybody else has had a chance to read them, I'm fine with taking the vote, voting everyone else.
That's fine. So make the motion. You can make one.
I move that we accept the
I'll
minutes
second
of the
it.
December 5th commission meeting, charter commission meeting. All right, that was the second.
It
Was.
was.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone against? I will abstain on the minutes.
So we'll call
Somebody-
it.
I think we're gonna call that a-
It's happened.
We have a second. Indeed. They can have everybody.
So, next item on our agenda is update on action items from previous meeting, which is probably gonna be the bulk of our discussion today, so I'll just go with mine first. First one I have is make a project plan for our required items, deadlines, dates. I did do that, it's actually pretty lame, I have about 4 or 5 dates to put in it, so that needs fleshed out a little bit more. I'd like to give you all your action items and add more things to it. So that's what that is. Follow up regarding swearing in, the mayor said that this is fine, we could do it at the next council meeting. There's a couple other fun community-esque type of things happening as well at that meeting, so she's very open to that.
Okay.
For those who want to do it, Monday,
This coming Monday.
this coming Monday.
7.
Yeah, I have that down.
7 on the 17th. She said we can use the existing house oath, just modify it for charter, we can use our own oath, whatever.
I have it drafted, it doesn't.
Yeah, it's okay. I don't know if anyone has any opinions one way or the other, I'm fine with the drafter. Okay, so I'll get that forward for her. And my last action item was, I wanted to follow up, confirm that everybody is into their official email account successfully.
No.
That would be a no, so I know Deb and Jen are both still having challenges.
I think I may have blocked my temporary password out though.
I'm gonna reach out after this.
Might as well do that the way you did. I did try a number of times.
Yeah, you're locked out now too.
All right then.
Mine more.
So the username is that email. We will refer that.
See, that's a
So you
mistake I
have
made.
so the username has to be the domain of Minerva Park.
So Minerva Park,
Minerva Park,
capitals,
no capitals, all lowercase, all one word,
yeah,
/ and
which slash.
yeah, and so I never know the backslash or forward slash the right name, but it's backslash. It's the one that is,
The one under the question mark?
No.
Or the one not?
Look, just where's the top, now it goes back, right?
yeah, the top goes back. If that's how you remember it, that works. I know it's the Windows one, because it's only used in Windows.
So,
And then the first part of your email address, so your first initial last name. That's your,
Without the Minerva Park.
without the @minervapark.org. That's
No
your
dots,
username.
no nothing, all the way.
No, no.
go back to those instructions I sent and look at number 2. And it has, so for my example, it will be block, just put, instead of charter questions, which is my example, just put D Walsh.
Yeah, okay, that's probably me.
Okay.
And the password is,
Well,
On your
whatever you
The
would
temporary
provide.
password is that you wrote down.
I'm ready, so I'm not gonna rattle it off, but yes,
yeah, I know, right? Good one.
Alright, so let me know if that works, if not, I'll get yours reset, and then Jen.
It'll have to be reset.
Feel okay.
You might have to use it on that one, I'll try.
Alright. Anyone else having challenges with their email? I didn't get one.
And if you need help, you can reach out to me and we can have you come over to my place and we can get you logged in. Once your passwords are reset, if that appears to be.
Jen, I'll reach out to get your password reset tomorrow, and then
Thank you, ma'am.
I'll follow up in 4 hours, and I'll follow up in 2 hours. So hopefully tomorrow will be reset.
Wow.
All right. I'd sent an email saying, let's use our village accounts for now, since you guys aren't in yet, we'll try to keep the official things going to you until you can it.
Why don't we just send it to their official accounts and their private accounts, right? And then we can remove those private accounts once we know they're in.
Yes.
That way we know that the stuff is there, and yeah, I think that's optimal.
I just want to make sure we're not leaving it out.
Yes.
Alright. That was everything I had. Any questions on my three items?
Was somebody gonna ask about why we couldn't get into our email because of the?
So I have confirmed that the email server that is housed here in this building is blocked from the guest Wi-Fi that we're all logging into. So, and we confirmed that with KGT on Monday. The last question, and basically it comes down to village administration giving us the passcode to the other one, getting into the non-guest access one. Which, Eric, you have that key? Don't shout it out because we are live streaming.
Yes, I understand. Handy on myself, no, I'd have to ask for that again. Because mine's logged in now to that particular one.
So if you could get that to me, I don't know how we would send it to each other without it becoming a public record.
I can.
The next meeting, it's
Yeah.
written down.
There are certain things that are exempted, that would be one of them for public record, so people can't access the
Oh, fair enough.
security.
Okay, then,
I'll get it to you.
yeah, get it to me and I'll make sure everybody else gets it and then
And
that's all that.
that'll be so that we could,
Access email while in the building.
Well, yeah, exactly. Unless you're cheap like me and dial and connect to a VPN, because that's what I'm doing right now.
and we can.
Is a private virtual network that is a service I pay for. You don't need it. Trust me, you don't need
I will not, ma'am. Very, all right, thank you for that, gentlemen.
it. Yes.
All right, so the next one is Kelly, over to you.
Pass.
Okay.
So in terms of following up on legalities, I'm gonna be really honest and say that I just didn't have time to follow up on much. Jean's office never called me back, and I haven't tried to call them again. Questions regarding legalities for the charter. I feel like I kind of resolved the stuff that you guys had asked me to look up, like in terms of the timelines and stuff like that. Was there something else I was
I
supposed
thought
to
there
follow
was
up
something
on?
else that you were waiting till to ask, and so we had more structured, formal questions.
I asked about timeline, I asked about oath, and we got the answers for the oath.
Okay.
I'll go through and look at my notes again between now and next week, but I feel like I've more or less resolved it. The one thing you might be thinking of is, I now have the names of several people that we can reach out to if we have basic questions. So like, they wouldn't be formal legal opinions, but it's people that were involved in the drafting of other municipal charters. I have those names. If we have questions, we can reach out to them.
That's what I was thinking.
But I don't know I don't think that needs to be a continuing action item. And then for the next one, going through the municipal charters and starting, the rough draft version 1. I have started that one. I will flesh it out a little bit more before next week, and I feel like I anticipate next week you'll come here, there will be a draft in the OneDrive that everybody will be able to start working with.
And once you have that, I want to jump on that for the project and deliverables.
Yes.
So they're planning to retain legal counsel at some point, or just wait until we need it, kind of thing? I mean, that's gonna, the question's gonna come up from
I
council.
think we're first trying to figure out if Jean's services under retainer for.
I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty thorough in my voicemail. I feel like if he were going to make himself available to us, I would have gotten a call back.
We know that Gene's contract with the village does not include this action. So if we are intending to make use of Gene, we will need to engage in a contract.
So his
I
office
think
has
that's a true statement.
Oh, yeah, it was at his general office line, I mean,
okay, but other people from the other attorneys, or you've reached out to other people at that office?
no, I have not.
Because
I think that was our
It was
first
just-
question.
Just, okay.
I know that we had an initial contact from the Brecker and Eckler people. If you want me to reach out to them again and get more information about pricing, I will do that.
I think it's worth it, but yeah, Deb, you.
Okay, so I have a sort of different question. The villagers voted to allow the creation of a charter. So, if my understanding is correct, at the end of all this process, this charter will be placed upon the ballot. Does our village councilor opine whether items being placed on the ballot for the village are valid?
I don't think you would have any obligation to do that.
He will if the council asks them to.
I was gonna say, I mean, if it's not, if the villagers asked for this charter to be placed on there, obviously they don't want a charter that doesn't pass legal muster. So the village, who's putting the charter on the
That's a
ballot?
relevant question.
So I think, so I'm gonna try to interpret what you're saying. So is your question, why doesn't these activities fall within the purview of his
No, that's not
contract? Then I don't understand your question.
If when we write this charter, at the end of the day, can the council hand the charter to the attorney and say, is this valid, or is this?
I mean, who's putting it on the ballot? Is it,
Okay, so the
It's
answer-
gonna be an ordinance that the council,
The answer to that is
that
that
wants to put on that.
under Ohio law, the way it shall work is we will instruct council to pass an ordinance saying, put this charter on the ballot, and then council doesn't have a choice, they have to put it on the ballot.
so, does the legal counsel for any village, when it's presented with a piece of legislation that council's gonna vote on, required to opine on it?
They're not voting on the charter, they're voting on the ordinance saying this charter, the Minerva Park Council shall, or the Village of Minerva Park shall cause this charter to be put on the general election ballot.
So, what's your fear in this?
Oh, I don't know.
I'm just saying, like, what's the outcome you're concerned about? That they'll ask him
We
for this
keep
and he'll.
worrying that what we're putting together is not legally valid. Okay, we keep hearing, what legal advice do we need?
So it would, the similar thing would be if the ordinance or if a resolution was to approve a contract, that the legal, legal would look at the contract and say the contract's legal. So what you're saying is any attachment to a ordinance or a resolution is also, you're asking if it is.
I'm wondering if
Yeah.
that's how it works in a village. You put something, but I'm not so concerned, as everyone seems to be concerned, that we need legal advice on everything. I don't know.
Well, you don't want to wait till that point to know that your charter has something illegal in it.
Well,
Because it doesn't give you too much time to change it.
I think it makes sense to look into it at this end of the year, right? Just because if we have the knowledge, we don't need it, great. If we need it, we'll have it.
I agree, but line it up.
But I mean,
We're working on the assumption too that we're gonna have the money, the funds appropriated
I think
for.
that's the other thing.
You know, we keep hearing
do.
$36,000 and postal just some of it.
Yeah. For right now, we do. And so better to get a contract in place
Let
before.
me suggest this, why don't I reach out before next Thursday, I will reach out to Ricker and Heckler, they're the only law firm that has expressed interest. I will reach out to them, find out what their pricing is like and report back. Between now and then, I think I will also kind of write down some ideas, maybe with the help of the rest of the legal subcommittee of this is what we would actually use legal counsel for and what we wouldn't use them for, because we've been going around this particular issue quite a bit.
I may be wrong, but wasn't there some person from Sunbury or something that offered up their services to us? Once a week?
That was Berkler and Eckler.
That was Brooklyn.
That was the attorney, that was the law firm that worked on Sunbury's charter.
So that's the one that has. it.
I'll reach out to them
Yeah.
and see what it's gonna cost and we'll figure it out.
We did say that we would recognize people in the audience at times if they had information that might be valuable for us. I don't know if I saw Mr. Fisher, thinking that he might have a piece of information, but I was gonna leave it up to the chair if she wanted to write.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here tonight with the commission. I am your planner for the village. I have about 20 years of experience. This is my fourth municipality I've worked for at this time. I have served on several different charter commissions in support of their particular, they're actually charter amendment commissions, I should say. This is my first pleasure of being through a process from beginning to end. It's unusual and rare here within the central Ohio area. In regards to the issue of whether or not you need legal counsel or should get it, the answer is very much yes. All councils and villages provide services to their commissions, whether it is under the guise or contract of the existing legal counsel, or in this case, to get your own independent counsel. It is highly recommended from a professional standpoint. It is a specialized area of law. And to your concerns, you definitely want to have something and basically have a member of your commission, independent of the council, that can give you independent legal advice, even of the village's own attorney, who I think, and I can't speak for Gene, but I've worked with him for a good decade. Probably in this particular case, someone else from his firm would serve you specific to your needs, but I will make sure. Go ahead.
What you noted that legal counsel was good. What were some of the issues that you saw raised that legal counsel provided advice for?
Typically speaking, so in these cases that I have served, charters already existed, number one. All right. So first qualifier. Second one, they're typically detail stuff. Can we add something in there regarding economic development to put it into executive session? The answer to that is yes. But those are the kind of questions that come up. Basically, they're detail oriented on charters that already exist. In your particular case, you're starting fresh, and you guys would like, I'm sure, the best potential legal advice to how you proceed. And there's going to be a lot of legal landmines potentially within any particular document you produce, and you want to make sure you've got a clean document to present to the voters.
Plus you can amend the charter, correct?
You can, that's-
So you
that's
can
what
put the
happens.
bones together, and then should you say, I want an economic development piece, you can add it in at a later date.
Absolutely, that's what different villages and municipalities have done.
So the villages that you've done or worked with, have they had an economic development?
Absolutely. Obetz is an example of the last village I've worked for. They probably, off the top of my head, they were the last ones to produce a charter. I know their administrator, who also worked with him as legal counsel when I was with POW, and he knew what he was doing when he put together, and he still had Prosper
Novus is a
advising.
manufacturing area, it's huge.
It is, but there's a lot in there that you can do under the Ohio Constitution that, you may not be aware of. In fact, most people aren't. For example, you can set up your own utility, and you may think that's quaint, but actually it's very important from an economic development standpoint to be able to buy electricity wholesale and sell it back to. You don't need to have a power plant or anything. You can just set it up to do that. That's just one of the finite little subtleties you can do within a charter under the Ohio Constitution.
Maybe ask what-
Sure, go ahead.
What villages have strong economic development plans in your opinion?
Well, I would say Obetz does, strictly because of the way they've done it. A lot of villages, once they reach 5,000, it's not many that, 5,000 is a small number. If you're growing, you're going to hit 5,000 pretty fast and you become a city. So you're never going to hit city status. And there's probably, be thankful for that in a lot of ways. You don't have to deal with unions and things of that nature, because once you get to city status, you have to. That's a different issue. You still have the full rights as a city does under any particular charter you set up under the home rule.
Any smaller villages, like Obetz, obviously, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, has all of the Rickenbacker, has all of manufacturing and Amazon and all that.
They have access. They have Amazon. Yes.
So, have you worked in smaller villages, like those are very small?
This is the smallest. You can't get much smaller. So, but if there are any questions, I can hand out my cards. I'm available to the commission for any questions they may have or any work you would like done. So, you're very welcome.
Thanks for keeping an eye out. All right. That's good information. Any other questions on legalities or Kelly's action items? Okay. All right, so Jen's at Hammond Hall had started this last week and kind of continuing on this week as far as drafting questions for current and former council members to get input from the stakeholders. So what updates have you guys got for us?
Not too much. I think we need like a face-to-face meeting.
We may need a face-to-face meeting. I mean, I put together questions on top of Dick's. I'm not sure that I'm happy with them. I'm not sure that everyone is in agreement that they get to the heart of what we want to ask. And I'm hoping that we could maybe each of us contribute and then decide together which questions we want and which questions we don't. Just go question by question from everyone and put something together. And I apologize because I'm not in the village email, so I didn't email this out. And I do think some of Dick's questions are good. But the other thing is we need to decide on a format. Are we going to use a scale? Are we going to ask sort of more direct questions? I mean, I'm not interested in using a scale of good to bad because I think it's it doesn't tell us anything. It doesn't tell us anything, and then collating the data from the scale based on the number of people we're surveying is not going to tell us anything. But I think we need to decide that too. I mean, I think the only thing so far is the same thing that we came up with, which is for former council members, we're asking for a written response. For current employees, we will interview them in person, and that's as far as we've gotten. I have questions, Dick has questions, I like some of Dick's questions, I like some of my questions, but I do need more input.
Are you guys able to coordinate a time, or I know everybody is, this is a terrible time of year to try to coordinate anything, but.
We've got this room starting at 4 all the way to 10, right?
I can come over.
Yeah, and Dick will probably be done with OSU pretty quickly, so.
Yeah, I think he said this was the last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, nightmare.
Were you a council person? Yes. Were you a council person? Yes.
So was Dick.
And so perhaps then you could point in the right direction for questions. In other words, you worked, then you might be aware of difficulties or things that worked exceptionally well.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well, and you know what, and I absolutely hear what you're saying, and one of the things that I wanted to stay away from were any leading questions.
oh, well,
I just
agree
wanna
with that. I'm
ask-
saying,
Like
as
raw
Deb said,
questions.
as Deb said, narrowing it down to the topics that you're, what was you suggested, well, economic development, or how things work, or.
Could you put the questions on that OneDrive and then everybody can answer them?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can get
Dick's,
Dick can get to the OneDrive, can you?
not currently, but
Dick's
Dick's are on there, and we'll have that with the OneDrive sitch worked out here probably by the end of tonight. And then I will upload my questions on there, and we can go from there. You guys can look and.
So would it, if you're trying to avoid leading questions, would it behoove us to have somebody with very little experience with the council as constituted and the village, like say Randy,
Hello, them.
or I, or anyone basic, or Nina for that matter, because look over the questions and try and pick out what seems to stick out to us. Would that be helpful to you, do you think? Because when I put together a bunch of questionnaires for the state when I was working for them, so I can sort of pick out procedural stuff rather than things that come from experience.
So that is, I think that's a wonderful idea, and I kind of thought the last thing we said last week was we would, put a bunch of questions on the OneDrive, everyone would take a look, everyone would, have a shot at adding, saying you don't want this one, let's change this one. That's what I had expected to do.
Okay.
That's what I had expected.
Well, then,
Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
Is that okay with
And
you?
the three of us, yes, absolutely, and the three of us maybe could just stay a few minutes after this meeting and see if we can find a time that might work for three of us, and then see if it works.
that sounds perfect.
And I think there's value to people who've worked on accounts and have that experience to say, here's things that maybe other people are going to ask. But also to your point, we don't want to leave and say, okay, well, what were you worried about? Let's ask everybody about my stories. That's not the direction we're going to go either, right? So hopefully we balance each other out, right? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and there are things that I want to get at that I know I absolutely cannot ask, because no matter how I ask, it will be leading. And that's not what I want. I don't want that at all. I want these questions to just make sense, but not be leading anyone in any direction.
Okay, so you guys are going to meet after the amount of time. You're going to figure out how to get things up in OneDrive.
Yes, I am.
We'll revisit this. And more. All right, so we're going to keep that one on the items. Any other comments, questions, concerns on that one before I jump down to Nina? All right, Nina, you are up. You're going to research our current demographics in our.
And I did.
And she printed stuff out.
Yes.
That's because she's highly efficient.
I'm retired.
And that, I wasn't gonna say.
There's that, yes. So there's two things that I'm gonna send around. I want you to see the work that I put in just this week on what the available sources are. And I would be completely comfortable with the available sources. And there's quite an array of sources. I was surprised, actually. Some of them are not relevant. But what's important about this is recognizing that even once I started to see what was available, what's available in great detail is inconsistent. It's very inconsistent, and also, so I only chose 2 variables to start with because they were the most common, number of people and the households. And I put it in order of date. But some of the stuff is rather contradictory. So I guess what I want to say about this is that I think we need to decide how this can be helpful to us. If you'll notice, the biggest number is from item 2. And I was very surprised about this. This is a very interesting platform to create community next door. And they seem to have lots of information, including details about things that people who belong to this in the village have shared with them. About stores that are good and where people go for this or for that. So, and I find it rather interesting that they had the biggest number. So, I'm not entirely sure, and so that specific example, the site material is current and it says it is to the 30th of October, but then in another spot, they say they got the information from the 2010 census. Right. What? So I'm not entirely sure, there's many hidden variables here in terms of how they came up with their number. I think we need to decide whether or not it's useful to us to even further pursue this, and then I have 2 other things to say about it. One, I started my own process related to MI Homes. And I looked at their website, and there's a number of categories on their website that didn't make sense to me entirely because they weren't defined. And I want to know how they define it. And then there's a map, and there's a very detailed map identifying every single one of the units that will be built. And then this week, I also saw a reference from Diane, and who referenced 250 units eventually. Now, that doesn't say how many people. So I was in the council meeting earlier in the week, and that's when I actually got exposed to Eric, and I just asked him if he had a direct contact there, and if he had information. He does. So I'm going to email him after the meeting with my specific questions around operationalizing what those categories are, how many people and how many houses are actually inhabited. There's a lot of things that we need to know about that. But what's clear is, I mean, even if you just multiply it by 3, that's what I would take as the number. But I think we could be more specific than that based on what he just told me when we were talking. I'm not sure how this is going to be useful to us, because if you could see the things that there's a lot of detail on, why do we want to know this? There's like 20 categories of age and gender. Who cares? I'm not caring about that. I don't want to know how many children there are under the age of 1.5. I mean, I don't see the connection.
A little too much.
So I guess I want to know from you guys what you think would be useful aside from the raw numbers around individuals and households, because that seems the most prominent to
I
me.
want to know what percentage are paying unit taxes.
I'm not sure we can find that out, but I'll try.
I mean, that would be a number I would like to know, because that helps with forecasting and.
Well, I think my own reading taxes may be due soon, so I'll go over there and talk to them. I've been there before.
Retired aren't going to necessarily pay unit taxes, and there's people that aren't paying in general. They don't pay, and they have, probably liens on the houses, so.
Eric, yeah.
You will be able to get a very aggregate value, so we'll ask the finance director for that value. You have to be careful because it's very valuable information, but it's also not necessarily legal to have it broken down in disaggregated values. So I think we can get you something that is large enough that it doesn't identify people, right? That's what they don't want to be done, is identify people.
You've got to have some number, or otherwise you couldn't plan, you couldn't budget for anything.
Well, you have, the way that they plan and budget in municipalities is the revenue streams that are coming in, and they use that, this is very basic. Based on that number that's coming in into a quarter, year to year, over several year plan, and the finance director typically put out a 5-year plan based on what they've got coming in versus projections and past amounts coming in. And it is based on household numbers and stuff. And so MI is changing that number, but it should add about, from a revenue standpoint, about 800,000 a year once it's fully built out is what the projection is, just so you know.
So that projection is based on some assumptions
It's based
according to
on,
the houses that we're gonna.
yeah, so for example, the houses cost a certain amount, right? So you have to maintain a certain minimum income level. You can assume that number. Now, typically, the income levels are gonna be higher, so a good finance director, as we have, takes a conservative value, the base number you need to get in there, and goes from there. So although the projections are 800,000, once it's all built out, it'll probably be higher, and that's always good. So, but yes, the short answer to your question is,
There is household data available around average income. I'm not sure it's useful because it's so inconsistent from one source to the other. I do have something, and that was a very good thing though that you said. Who else has something that they're specifically interested in so we can see if we can get it?
The corporations that are within the village, that are not, who are the corporations? Corporate.
That's right, we did talk
very
about
small.
that. We talked about businesses and corporations.
Well, I don't even know where we get that, do you?
Well, we actually, as luck would have it, council, when Brian was on it, approved a contract with a gentleman to go out and do a kind of economic development survey. And he has recently submitted a draft of that, and I would be happy to send that out to everyone.
Awesome.
And then
Awesome.
does the draft include every business
It-
that is
I will
located within?
double check, but I believe.
Or every piece of commercial property that's
Yes.
located. So do you have the commercial property that's located within Monroe Park?
So there's two parts to that answer. So you have, a lot of times you have these small intermittent ones coming in and out, and those aren't necessarily well tracked. The larger ones, the answer is yes. And I'll send you his draft once we approve it, and we'll get that over to you.
When you anticipate it'll be approved?
I will talk to the mayor and see when we can, because I sent it to her a few days ago after I received it, and
We didn't pay him yet for it, if it's on.
well, it's been a long process, so he's received most, just on the side, he received most of his money. This is his final deliverable for the whole.
And it includes commercial properties within the village of Monroe
It does, and there'll be maps and things of that nature, I'm sure.
Park.
Anything else?
I know you said you're not interested in how many children are under age 1.5, frankly, neither am I, but I am interested in knowing, I mean, it matters, right, adults of voting age versus children in population. And I know, especially over there in new section, I mean, it's just falling with kids. So, yeah, you're adding a whole bunch of people, but you're adding a lot of kids too. So I would just be interested in knowing the adult population, not just how many are in a household, because if you're adding 5 kids for every house, it's just gonna skew nothing dramatically, but I would like to know the adult.
So you're interested in over 18?
Yes.
Okay. Are you including these things, that people are citing?
Yes, I'm writing that.
Excellent. I have another form to pass around that is specific to just villages, all the villages in the state of Ohio. And I've gone through the villages specifically to identify the ones that are about our size. And
Absolutely. Thank you.
there's not very many.
There's one, two. Thank you.
There's 10 that are about our size or much smaller. Like, for instance, Unionville Center, which has 220 people. So, but this is helpful too, because it really kind of gives you a clear picture of who our closest relatives would be in terms of population, either current or anticipated. And it gives a place to start in terms of looking for whether or not they have charters, which I'm very happy to do.
I would be interested in that.
So it's Ashley, Lithopolis, Crooksville, Somerset, Roseville, Frankfurt, Kingston, Ridgewood, Unionville Center, and that's it.
Yeah, on the sheet, they had a charter, this other one from.
Yeah. For the whole state? Is that the whole state right
That's
there?
the whole state.
Okay,
So it'd be easy to just
Yes,
check it against. that.
absolutely. Yeah. I'm thinking Crooksville, I I mean, and haven't we been operating to some degree informally off of the number 2,200 to 2,400, people, and all said and done with the MI section? Is that the number that we can sort of think
Two hundred
about?
and 50 houses times 2.3 or 2.4, you're getting very close to that 10,000.
Yeah. They don't have one, perfect. I like being a trailblazer, don't you?
Enough, that's more virtual.
You know, and then we're teasing out the information right now, that's what we're doing. And I'll continue to dig now based on the things that, I'm hoping to work closely with you too, Eric. I think that we can do this, I do.
We're very open to using all resources that already have knowledge, so we don't have to tease it out.
Hello, yes.
Using resources, effectively. All right, well, thank you, Nina. Dug in some, I'm interested to see what more we can
Okay.
come up with. Did anyone, I know that was something that we talked about last time, does anyone have any other questions about just demographics of the Lawrence Park? Anybody have any other questions on that? All right, Brian, you are up, so you were charged with giving us just a high-level overview of what do we have now? Currently, in the park.
Okay, you have a call.
I know, thanks.
It's
It is.
I'm expecting mini music and Star Wars.
No, I didn't even put pretty it's just an outline, because if I'm talking and I don't have an outline, I'll talk all night and not say anything.
But you usually chase,
No,
approved,
no. So the first thing I wanted to say is that in this, I lean very heavily on this that's up in the OneDrive, the Village Officers Handbook that is produced by the Ohio Municipal League. And it lays out in much finer detail what I will discuss now. And then. Excuse me one second. Okay. So once we're, here we go. All right, so what we have now as a statutory village, right, our structures, we have a mayor, right, a council that by state statute is required to have 6 members. We have a village clerk and a fiscal officer. We do not have a village administrator, but that is something that is allowable by state statute, but it's a different animal than what we have to talk about in this room as a city manager or village manager. It's a much more specific thing. We'll come back to that. A board of trustees of public affairs, which is something we have had in the past, but we do not have now. And then some various other things, but these are the big ones. So the mayor's has administration for their powers and duties. The mayor shall perform those duties established by village council in its bylaws and ordinances, and is the chief executive and chief law enforcer. And so the interesting thing in there that has been coming up a lot in our current council is that there are questions about what the council's duties are and what the mayor's duties are. And it is because of exactly this vagueness that, in my opinion, the mayor's powers are given in the village ordinances. And I want to back out of this because what I wanted to show you all, so these are the village's codified ordinances, right? And so if you go up here and you search mayor, basically what you have is in each one of these chapters of our codified ordinances is one little line here or there that enumerates our mayor's powers. And so, for example, a really good one was this one here that says the maintenance supervisor shall perform such duties as are prescribed and directed by the mayor, which means no matter how much council may want to give direct order to the village maintenance supervisor, that is codifiedly, that is prescribedly a power of the mayor. So we have had loggerheads over what these powers are, and part of that is because it's all hidden and buried in these ordinances.
Is that first definition you showed us, or whatever that was, the,
Straight out of that handbook, and
it's basically saying that the mayor doesn't have the ability to introduce any new legislation?
you know, mayor can't bring legislation, the mayor could ask
That's all
council.
the way that says, I don't see anything, I don't read into anything other than that.
Yeah, no, so the mayor, correct, the mayor can't introduce legislation, right? Legislation is entirely the purview of council, right? The mayor could go to council and say, hey, I think we need legislation regarding this topic. But then it is entirely up to the council to draft, craft, and pass that legislation. I can give you an example of that during my time on council. It was actually the chief of police, but also the mayor asked us to consider wild animal ordinance, like, keeping exotic pets. And we did
The
that.
howler monkey.
Yeah, immediately following the Howard Monkey affair. And it wasn't taken up. We didn't really have any interest and nothing moved forward. So the mayor cannot do legislation, yes.
So you showed us what our current law is, and you noted that at times there's been a dynamic between the council and the mayor. Why hasn't the council acted to amend the law, to change it?
Because I think that's a matter of opinion, and I don't know if you necessarily want me to opine opinion, but what I have witnessed is that individuals say, well, I want to know what these powers are, and they don't go and look at the codified ordinances to find them.
And it wasn't as easy as it is now to look up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but you know what, and I agree with that opinion entirely. But I also think the village doesn't have anything that pulls that stuff out and clearly defines things. I mean,
Well,
literally, you have to read every single code. Well,
It's
well,
linked
that's
from
the
the
way
village
it is.
Could
website.
a
There's
council,
not a paper book.
Oh, no. Yes, there are binders, right? We have new
There are
binders.
binders, and be very thankful it's electronic now because they're not complete, and that was always
I think,
an issue for staff.
yeah, they're old, like
Yeah.
1990.
They're not always kept up.
Or 2002.
Your best bet is to go to the website, and I'll show you where, if you want to review them all. So if you go to the website, on the homepage, and right here, codified ordinances. And we just went through this codification process. This was just completed last year.
Right.
So this has everything that was passed up through, I want to say, the end of 2017. It won't have anything new for 2018, but
It will,
it'll periodically be updated.
It's probably worthwhile to just point out to everybody, so the codified ordinances are the same ordinances as what you will click on one page back where you're looking at them in chronological order when they were passed. Codified just means it's been organized into a file tree, basically.
could a council member potentially introduce some type of legislation or whatever to amend one of these to say by the mayor or a council member or?
Absolutely.
So they could do that at any time they want.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So if a council member has a beef about something,
Yeah, no, absolutely. So if one council member who may have a great interest in giving direct instruction to the maintenance supervisor, got 3 other council members engaged, and they drafted an ordinance that amended that ordinance to say the mayor and any 4 members of council, or any member of council, or the chair of the
Right.
facilities
Service committee,
committee
yeah.
or service committee, and they passed it, then yes, they could make that. So in a comparison, right, if they go for comparison, if that duty were enumerated in a charter, right, those duties, responsibilities, powers are enumerated in the charter, to change that would take an amendment of the charter. Right? And that's a much different animal, right? That then takes a draft that has to go on the ballot, and people would have to vote on it.
but can we change these individual things on our charter? we can make those changes to
Yeah.
separate.
Yes, explicitly, yes.
And I think that's where I was trying to lead to, is that it is in our interest to clearly enumerate the powers and responsibilities and duties of all of these people in hand.
So is this seen by everybody, or is it just me as a strong mayor?
Our current situation, no, I don't think our current situation
It's a
matches up
strong
to.
council.
Is it strong
It's a-
council?
So it's,
He needs their approval to do a lot of things.
Yeah.
The powers of the mayor are granted or not granted by the council.
Yeah.
Now, once they're granted, they're there until the council takes it away. But, and that's the source of the current problems,
You
right?
have hiring and firing all done by the mayor, right?
Council can take that away.
Hiring with approval of council.
Yeah.
Okay, what about financial? How much money can the mayor spend without any approval from council?
If the budget
It's
determines
really
that,
small,
and then
so-
the council determines the budget,
Yeah.
approves the budget. So she can
this-
spend up to,
I believe, and I would have to go back and do direct research, or Eric may opine if I get it wrong. I believe that there is a purchase order limit. So if the mayor were to want to buy something, there's a purchase order limit, and the number I recall is $2,500. And so the mayor could buy a piece of equipment for up to $2,500 without direct approval from council. However, the mayor cannot engage in contracts without direct approval from council, right? So if buying that piece of equipment required the engagement of a contract, so like if you're financing a car, or, was buying a copier that comes along with a service contract, right? And it's only $2,500, but now there's a service contract that goes along with it. The mayor couldn't do that without council's approval of the contract, right? So, and then the biggest, in my opinion, difference between what we've seen in other things we've looked at between a strong mayor or not, is that in a strong mayor form of government, if you recall, the mayor had a veto power.
Right.
The mayor could turn around and say, that's nice of you, council, for passing that, but I say no. And then they would have to, if the council wanted to pursue that further, they would need a 3/4 majority to overrule the veto. We don't have anything like that, right? If the council passes it, the council passes it, and it is now law. And, yeah, go ahead.
So I have, I guess, a couple of thoughts on this conversation with the codified ordinances and the powers of the mayor. First, I guess I want to point out is the current codified ordinances of Minerva Park are a great example of organic growth over time, and that's why it's kind of confusing and messy to separate out the powers of the mayor versus, what the council is doing. So what I would suggest is we keep that in mind as we draft this charter. We need to be very careful about clearly separating powers and clearly defining, and having a mind of, so once this charter is in place, the council is still going to exist and still going to be able to pass ordinances after that. We want to make sure that the rules are written in such a way that they're not just going to organically mess everything up again over the course of 50 years, right? So I think that's something good that we should keep in mind. And then the second thought that I had is the codified ordinances here have great value to us in terms of comparison. So as we start working with each section of the new charter, one of the questions that we've had over the last 2 or 3 weeks is, okay, well, what do we have now? How do we understand what we have now? So when we start working on the legislative section of the new charter, we can look at the examples in other charters around the state, but we can also look at the codified ordinances. How does it currently work? And then we can actually use that to ask the pointed questions that we've been searching in the dark for, to say, okay, well, this is how it currently works in Minerva Park. This is how they currently write their ordinances. Do we want to change the way ordinances have to be written? Do we want to change what parameters have to, be done in order to make changes, as it goes forward? So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that's a couple of things.
How many ordinances do we have?
Many.
Is that the whole line down?
I mean, yeah, well, each one of these it's by parts, and then, what do they call it? It should work on here.
Sure.
So there are parts, and then titles within those parts, and sometimes chapters. So like, this chapter is gonna have 13, and this one here about drugs is gonna have 18. and
All right, I was just told me that.
Yeah.
How many major components of our ordinance?
I would probably look at, I mean, the administrative code, that we're gonna touch. I think we are mostly in, I don't actually know. I could make something up, but I'd rather tell you the truth than say, to give you a real answer, I'd rather look and give some consideration. Because unfortunately, I think a lot of the stuff that we are going to deal with is all sort of organically grown into and baked into, because we, in my opinion, should be looking at primarily form of government, powers and duties of those people, and then some other trickling down things, and that's going to be interspersed throughout all of this.
Probably, if you want, take a look at that and pull it out of common sense language.
Yes.
Stuff and pieces and parts of it that then fit into yours. You're putting the framework of it.
That'd be great.
And a lot of the charters, the example charters, make very obvious mention of continuance in force if the ordinance is not otherwise addressed here.
Yeah.
So it's not like it wipes out everything, and suddenly if you forgot to put in something about utilities, then it's just the Wild West of utilities. Anything that's already there will stay there unless otherwise changed.
I'm just curious, do you know the date of the oldest
First
ordinance?
ordinance.
Of our oldest ordinance?
Yeah,
I mean,
Goes back to.
that are still on the books. I mean, we're
yeah, it's still
we're
on the
78
books.
years old. I would
I
imagine
think
that
they-
there's something 78 years old out
So my area of familiarity on this is, of course, mostly zoning and planning those things. And most of those things, those items got changed in your ordinances back in 84 to 89 time, mostly 84, right? Certain parts of your code are regularly updated in order to meet current standards. For example, police, they have to match up with the, Ohio Revised Code, ORC, and they have to meet other case law as it comes out, right? So those have to be regularly updated. And zoning is kind of similar in that regard. Otherwise, you just can't force it. So there's those. I don't think you're going to find anything, I could be wrong, but dating back pre-84, because a lot of stuff's been updated. That seemed to have been a big moment in the history where a lot of ordinances were changed at that point. But there could be something from 1948. Sometimes there is.
I think on the silo, where you can see some of the old records, there are some ones that are older, yes.
It's
Mostly maybe things, setting salaries and setting things.
Yeah, those exist and those are part of the history, but as to whether they were overwritten at a certain point in time,
Right.
what's enforceable. I don't know that there's anything prior to 84. I think there might be a couple 79s that I've seen in there.
There's probably certainly some ordinances that'll, it'll have the original date, 1948, revised in 72,
Exactly.
revised in 84, revised in 2002.
Do you know how often they upload the new ordinances passed?
So here's how it's going to work from this point forward. Codification is something that's normally done in most municipalities, and Minerva Park has joined that club at this point. So every year now, roughly in the new, early part of the year, because they wait to get your whole year of ordinances, it'll all be uploaded and changed. That's part of the ongoing contract to have that done. That's very normal. Otherwise, you'll have to go to where the ordinances and resolutions are on the website and just see what's been done, or call someone like myself and we can tell you what's happened.
She said we have a contract, we hired somebody to do it too.
Yeah, this group here who does this one is currently who we have a contract with.
because before that, it was just those lines. And if somebody ripped the page out of the binder,
All gone, yeah.
Is it done usually within the first quarter of the following year?
Yes, typically it has. That's the what's done.
Does the village ever put the contracts that it has up on the web so people know? I mean, it's a public record if you have contracts.
It is. I don't know that part. I'm not charged, and I don't know if that's normally done.
And the legislation says it's an exhibit, but the exhibit wasn't always supposed to have attached.
Right, so it'd be nice if there would be, have a section on the website that says, here's the current contracts that we have.
it's a whole other animal.
Another animal, and that goes back to staff, and part of that's your village size.
Can I ask one more question,
Yes, ma'am.
Eric? Is there like a cutoff, or is there an end date by which this company has to have the new ordinances?
It's a good question. We'd have to look at the contract.
Well, could you get the contract?
I can.
That'd be great. Thank you. I'll make a public record request, 14943.
We can do that.
For the, contract. Okay. ever had the original period of time?
America's will have a fashion items.
Yeah.
Okay. So moving on, so also in structure, there's the council, right? And so it's 6 people, it's the legislative power, right? It passes resolutions and ordinances. The difference is nearly indistinguishable, but typically ordinances are long-standing things and resolutions are statements, right? We resolve that nobody likes Mondays and lasagna is delicious. But an ordinance is, this is how we are going to zone property going forward, right? So ordinances are typically long-standing. The other thing that I didn't get up there in bullet points is that the council has the power of purse, right? So council does the appropriation of funds, right? Appropriating is taking funds and, giving them a purpose, right? Money can't be spent unless it's been appropriated. And also the power to authorize the mayor to engage in contracts, right? And that is, and I guess anything else that by ordinance, they give themselves the power to, because there is no, so if you look at state law, it specifically says that in cities, right, the legislative body has no administrative powers. But it says for villages, administrative power can be shared. And that sharing would be by ordinance. I didn't find any ordinance, I mean, we can look. I guess we can do that same council. And so somewhere within those items enumerated may or may not be administrative powers granted to our council. I didn't go through and look at these because I didn't think of it when I was preparing this.
Nice bedtime reading.
Yeah, exactly.
Are council members siloed as far as what they can introduce?
No.
You can just compare the streets committee doesn't mean you can't do
So
something other than streets.
yeah, so this is, so that gets to how we do things, not necessarily how the statute does things. So our village has committees. Those committee assignments are currently divvied out by the mayor, but they're working for next year's rules of council. It sounds like they've agreed to change that the council will decide their own committees. And then those committees work on things, and the way it should work is, so the streets committee, goes and investigates the condition of the streets, enumerates the potholes and brings to council the need, and then council, based on the committee's recommendation, passes legislation to fund the project to go fix the
So you have
streets.
to hire the contractor to do that. How does that work?
So the hiring of the contractor, so depending on the size of the contract, that's gonna vary.
Say
Right?
it's
So,
$50,000.
well, 50,000 is a magic number, right? So let's do two, let's do two to say it is a project known to be less than $50,000. There's no reason to assume it's going to get to $50,000, right? Then, so we say we have this project, it's gonna be less than $50,000. Council can go find contractors, the mayor can go find contractors, a decision is made to hire the best, and they're hired.
You just vote on that?
Yeah, it's in the legislation. So this is the legislation. It says we're authorizing the mayor to engage in this contract, and it's a contract with a vendor at a price, and they approve it.
Because the mayor engages, the council is telling the mayor that she's allowed to engage
In that contract with that one, yeah.
And then you go back to the council for approval, I guess.
If something changes, yeah, substantively. Now, if it's over $50,000, we've talked about this before, that would require bidding, right? So if it's a project that we know or have reason to believe would be over $50,000, by state law, that requires a bidding process, and that bidding process requires an RFP to be produced for that request for work to be published in certain kinds of places for a certain amount of time. I think I read this the other day, it's, once a week for 2 months, yada, yada, yada. All the bids need to be opened in public, right? They need to be reviewed and read in public. And then Again, council and the mayor together would decide best in, and the language is funny, it's not the least expensive, but the best and lowest cost, right? So it doesn't have to be the cheapest if you think somebody's gonna do substantively better work. And again, there's a contract that authorizes the mayor to engage in that contract, or a bit of legislation that authorizes the mayor to engage in the contract.
That's a state law.
The bidding process is state law,
Unless
right?
we
and-
are a chartered village,
Right.
this is one of the first things that I brought up.
Right, so a charter can change that threshold, right? I don't know if we could get rid of it entirely, that might be it doesn't seem, right, it's because the purpose of it is transparency. So I don't think it would be wise to get rid of it altogether, even if you could. But, right, there are projects that we know are, it becomes onerous to go through that bidding process. An example is the East Shore Court project we have going on now, that we have to get it out, and it's going to delay it another 6 to 8 months at least. Right, just because of that process. But if we had done a chartered village and had reset that to, say, $100,000, we wouldn't have to do it, and maybe those poor people wouldn't have a flooded backyard anymore come spring. Right, so part of that, and that is definitely something I know we've talked about before, and I know I've expressed, and Jen has expressed a strong interest to visit that, but setting that at a more reasonable, workable number is a good idea.
And can you also, tweak it so not only the dollar amount is steady, I think you make a valid point, you can't cripple the government when the people in the village are suffering. But can you also say that, go up to a certain dollar amount for relates to health and safety or something like that?
That's a good question.
I don't know.
Well, Eric seems to have a,
There's an opinion, go on.
I've worked under certain bidding contracts in different charter villages. So, again, OBEX, good example, spent a couple of years there. They did their charter not that long ago, and I would highly recommend you look into it because it's got a lot of nifty things he put into it to take full advantage of the Ohio Constitution. But that said, OBEX, for example, lists there's a 200,000. Okay, so they've got a high limit, number one. Number two, if you have a health, welfare, and safety, a true emergency, just so you know, you can exempt these things in the vast majority of cases, just so that's out there. There's true emergency, you can just go get it done.
Is that under current state statute or
I
is there a
believe
charter?
so. I believe it's under state law. You don't have to have that in the charter. I put a small qualifier that I know that in those cases, if you've got, like in Alaska, with the earthquake, they just go out and fix the bridge, right? Nobody's waiting on
Okay,
an example.
I agree with you. In a true emergency, you probably have to do anything on the police
That's
cars on state.
But for most cases,
You ever seen a charter where they limit it for a dollar amount for X, Y, Z things, and I don't know.
Yes.
Those things. Okay.
you can, the legal, when you say limit, you mean that there's sort of different tier.
Yes,
Yes, you can do that for construction purposes, and that's a capital outlay, for example.
okay.
And then you have operational outlays. Your legal counsel, for example, you could set that as a limit for any particular service contract, if you so chose. You have a lot of flexibility in what you're going to do here, which is very exciting. So many things.
So I feel like we're getting a little bit in the weeds here. I feel like these are all good questions, but questions for like whatever subcommittee you put in charge of doing this. So
I wanted to wrap around with one last idea that came up earlier. We were talking about what are the questions we should be asking a charter commission retained legal counsel. And I think some of those questions are exactly the right kinds of questions, right? So we want to try to tease out how we can set up bid limits. And I think that's the kind of thing that we would want somebody who is a lawyer who specializes in those kinds of things to get a best answer.
And I think you're right about, we're not gonna need a lawyer for the vast majority of it, but there are some details we are absolutely gonna need a lawyer for, and the bidding process, the dollar limit and all that, that is for sure we're gonna need a lawyer, and then I wanna know how not to stay in the ways of, I'll stop stopping after.
You're okay, because we're on the last one of the action items.
I wanna know what a health, safety, emergency is. Health, safety, or welfare emergency is, I wanna know how that's defined. And I wanna define it.
It's not already, so that's a takeaway.
Yeah, that is an excellent parking lot item.
And-
But, okay, so let's, sorry.
All right.
Totally should move on.
Yeah. So
Yes.
another important one is village clerk, right? Village clerk / treasurer. It's really, can be the same thing, and that's how we operated. It can also be an elected position, or council can pass an ordinance to make it an appointed position. So if you remember back in this village, not too very long ago, it was in fact an elected position. And that changed, and now it's an appointed position, and that's how we
That
have.
was a good change.
And I wasn't here when it happened, I only heard tell that it did happen. But yeah, and the clerk is responsible for keeping, many of the prescribed necessary documents, so they're, holding the ordinances that are passed, they are maintaining the contracts that we're engaged in, they are maintaining certain filings for the state and the Board of Election and all that kind of stuff. And as our fiscal officer, they're preparing our budget and our tax filings and managing our audits and all of that. Bookkeeper plus.
Extraordinary.
Yes, exactly. And then after this, what I want, yes, absolutely.
When you have a village clerk and you said appointed, do they still have to meet some kind of minimum qualifications?
They need to be qualified to do the job.
And the PD written for
Uh,
position description?
Yes.
Yeah, we have one. Yeah. But it's and then when they're appointed, it's also with the approval of council, right? So it's
Okay.
the mayor appoints with the advice and consent of council. But it's, whereas as opposed to when it's an elected person, the elected qualifications are an elector of the village and a resident for 1 year. Right, that was.
Yeah.
So,
All right,
okay,
we're getting out of the weeds there.
Yeah,
I know
out of
that
the
you researched the budget, but I want to.
okay, I actually didn't, I just put the 5-year plan on the OneDrive.
I thought you did that, and I didn't have time to look at it.
I looked at it.
I plan to dig into that sucker.
I just wanted to say
Talk about voting.
one more thing.
one that makes you.
Because it came up earlier, this board of public trustees of public
Yes.
affairs, Minerva Park used to have one because Minerva Park used to operate its own wastewater treatment plant.
Yes, it is, yes. it is.
And when a village has a utility, they are required to have a board of trustees of public affairs. In fact, I saw this going through all of Minerva Park's election results, and I saw a board of trustees, I was, what the heck is that? And I asked somebody who's been a 50-year resident, he said, I have no idea. So then when I was researching this, I found out, and I was very glad to find that out. If they have a utility and they don't have a board of trustees of public affairs, it's because they have a village administrator, because that is another,
Yeah.
so that is how you can have an appointed person in charge of the public utility that is operated by the village. And that is all I wanted to say about that. We handed all that back to Ohio, Columbus.
It was Columbus.
Yeah,
It was Columbus. And that,
So we own the water lines.
I will bring that in. I don't know that that's perfect.
That's fine.
It's a great after meeting.
Yes.
All right, thanks. All right, so new item for discussion. Can we update, and we've got profiles on the website.
Yeah.
Can we update maybe either positions or email addresses or something to make more?
Yeah, I can put that. Can you send me the spreadsheet of everybody's emails? That way.
I'll actually run one.
Oh, then thank you for reminding that. I've looked at that a dozen times and never thought about that, but yeah, I'll get that done this week.
Applications for open commission positions, we've got 2.
Yay.
3, you received 1 all
Okay.
Wow, really? Interesting.
I know who that's from.
We only have 3,
Oh,
2
yeah.
of them are open OneDrive.
She emailed you and she said she copied me.
So I've got printed out copies, I didn't make 13 of them, but I've got the originals and I scanned them in, put them on OneDrive as well. I have a lovely after meeting story about how I got one of them. And yeah, she personally delivered it, I was so prepared, but nonetheless. So we've got one from Linda Allison and one from Edward Bell. So I would really want everybody to read through them. They both gave us a letter of intent and also a resume. I don't know that we have specifically defined qualifications as far as what you have for planning and all that. We don't. So I think that this
We're not
right now.
So I have a question for us, and that is, so having been on council when we had to replace a council person, we had the opportunity to adjourn into an executive session to discuss our applicants, right? Because you don't necessarily want that discussion to be public record if you have, I don't know, if it was me applying and you said that Wolf guy, all he ever does is, scratch his butt and, we don't need a butt scratcher here, then you don't want that to be in the public record. I just put it. But anyways, right, so I don't know if this body is allowed to adjourn into executive session.
And you know what I want to say to you, don't you?
But,
What about our rules? That's exactly what I want to say
I
to you
mean,
about
does
that.
Robert rules allow us to adjourn into executive session?
Well, I
Is
mean,
that-
but we agreed that we didn't have to adopt the whole of Robert's rules.
It's just a guideline.
Exactly, and it's
It's not-
just a guideline.
I mean, if we're,
It's not official.
No, it's not.
So how do we want to do it? I
I
agree.
don't know, yeah, but I'm just saying we.
I move that we adopt the ability to retire to executive session. Or,
Personnel matters or.
Yeah, yes, and that's, because.
Pending legal opinion.
Yeah,
Because that one we can get pretty back to, I believe you can, as an independent body, but this is where your attorney who should be on staff will give you any
Yeah.
advice. But we'll get that answer back pretty
So
fast.
let's
And are we
say,
allowed to add numbers or not allowed?
You are.
we are allowed to, but here's the thing we may want to add them judiciously, right? Even though we have 3 spots open and we have 3 applicants, if one of them is woefully unqualified or a butt scratcher, or maybe it could even be a matter of personality, that a person comes in and says, what I'm here to do is stop this process.
But that
Right.
person could have been, had a petition and gone around and have gotten.
But they didn't.
But they didn't. That's
Right, and so lucky us that they didn't, but now we have that opportunity to be judicious about this. And I think that those may not be conversations we want to have in public, so we need to confirm if we can adjourn to an executive session.
so for today, let's acknowledge that we have them. Everybody, I know that we're all busy, please take the time to at least read those 2 items before our next meeting. We will agree on that. And then we'll take that as an action item, and we can have that as an action item to follow up on what our procedure shall be.
Do we have right to go into executive session?
Did you say, it like, they're just in hard copy or are they uploaded?
They're on the OneDrive as well.
They're on the OneDrive, okay.
and you'll be able to put the third one up, it should be in your email, those. When you're in a location that allows you to look at it.
Right, when I finish. Okay.
And then you can credentials.
Is the intention to maybe make a decision by next, at
The sooner the better.
Yeah, the sooner the better. They
Maybe
will
have
know.
everybody just keep an eye on their emails, and if you and I maybe talk after the meeting, we can come up with a plan.
You may want to invite these people to the meeting to speak at least too.
Oh, yeah, I would like that.
Okay,
That's a good.
I would like that.
alright, so Kelly and I will take that as action items to figure out what we can do and also some structure to it. Alright, I don't want that discussion, I'm just gonna skip that. So, as far as timing, we're doing pretty good. Do we want to tackle any of the parking lot items today?
What are the parking lot items?
I'm sorry, I thought they were up there. How to communicate.
Oh, my apologies. I was missing the
technology. How we give evidence say on this agenda.
Good.
Oh, in that case, hang on. Further discussion of how this charter works in regards to existing laws. I think that one's still in the parking lot. We'll dig into that. And then corporate tax, we're gonna keep that out there. I don't know if we want to add anything to any of those or add anything to parking lot or future discussion for next week?
I have a quick question, which is very easy. When are we going to start communication with council? When are we going to present?
It's a good question. So I think that next week is a great time, since we're going to be doing the oath. We can also give an update.
I know the rewards are swollen already.
Somebody didn't mention to me that those things are usually the first council meeting of the month. So I was planning on doing it next week. And I was trying to do the first council meeting going forward.
You can change that now.
Or start a new trend.
Well, so I think one of the things we have to do, we are not on their agenda as of yet, right? So we do need to either, get an agenda item, or we have to decide that we're not gonna bother with that, and we'll just have somebody at the end of the meeting during citizens' comments, give an update then. And I know I have asked twice to get an item on the agenda, and it wasn't this time around, because I was there prepared to give an update this Monday. And since it wasn't on the agenda, I didn't give an update. So, yes, Eric?
So the mayor has talked to me directly about that, so I think the intention was to have an item for you. I don't know, it may have just been a miscommunication, but we can make sure you get on the agenda next time.
Yeah.
No
Can
problem.
you get us for this Monday,
Yes.
and then the first regular council meeting of the month going
Yes.
forward?
Yes.
Thank you.
On the agenda. Who's the agenda?
And then Eric, what's the best way to, sorry, Shelley, you were first, go ahead.
The answer to her question is, it's mostly the mayor coordinates with, when necessary with council, but she can just tell the fiscal officer does the agenda, put it on. So it's fairly easy, we'll make sure it happens.
Thank
you.
Yeah, I was probably gonna ask the same question as far as putting on the agenda, what's the right way to do that?
Yes, it will not be hard.
But yes, we're already approved to do the oath next week, and I'm happy to provide the update next week, and perhaps formalize that a little bit better coming January.
Does anybody,
Yes,
does anybody have any idea about maybe a first meeting for citizen feedback on form of government? Anyone have any idea?
are we ready for that meeting? Are we ready to present?
We don't collectively have an opinion.
No, we're not ready, but I'm thinking in terms of space and appropriate time frame to let people know.
And maybe we don't want our opinion formulated when we have this, right? So I'll tell you what I'm thinking, and you can, you're free to tell me I'm wrong. But what I'm thinking is that we should have a meeting, right? Either, let's be optimistic, somewhere bigger than this room, because lots of people are gonna show up. So Pastor Fike was nice enough to offer the church. Maybe we use the church and we present, here are the forms of government that we could select, or opt for and customize in a charter. And we enumerate them, give them as a list and what they mean as best we understand it, and then open it up to a discussion of some kind where people can come up, identify themselves, and give their opinion on the issue at hand with some amount of leeway in a 3 to 5 minute time frame.
So, yes, I think that we talked about doing similar to
What Diane had done.
thank you so
Yeah.
much. An informational, here's literally what the choices are, right?
Yeah.
Here's what each one of them means. As compared to we're making a third form of government throwing out the hat, right?
Yeah.
So here's the choices, here's the ones, so we can even include, here's the ones that just frankly don't apply to us, they're a choice, but they're just not.
But not ones that were considered.
You can talk, but we won't listen.
Right, I mean, yeah. So, and make it more of an educational, here's the information, or including in conversation, get their feedback, but to your point, control feedback
Well,
to.
it has to be actionable. We have to be able to, if we have a meeting with people, we have to be able to act on what they say.
Right, we should capture that information,
Yes.
and then we should, be able to bring it back and discuss it and say, you know what, we were all, I thought this, but everybody in the room was really all about that other, and maybe that's.
Well, and I think that what's gonna happen the very first meeting is we're gonna field a ton of questions about the differences in the forms of government. People are gonna ask question after question, trying to understand exactly what each of those forms of government are.
I would be asking questions about our current form of government.
And you know that people are going to be asking that, you know they are, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think, obviously, if we're gonna do something like this, we'll need to have a moderator, whether it's Rainey or someone else, because we'll have the meeting on form of government, and if we don't moderate it, someone's gonna stand up and just wanna talk about the sewers for 5 minutes.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree.
And I think if we preface it before getting citizen feedback, that, you know, we really understand that there are a lot of people here today who have information to give. Let's all be respectful of everyone else's time, please.
Maybe that's the opportunity to do an online survey or something.
By the time we get that put together, though, I don't know for the
It
first
can be
meeting.
on our
that's-
website, I mean, it's.
I mean,
Well, I think I'll let get information out with this.
You can do that
Get
too.
information out, let them formally questions and what they think on it, and have an online survey.
So-
And then they can just hand it
I found, that makes sense. What forms of government are we representing?
It was mayor, council, keep what we have now, but we might change some of the types of things. There can be a council manager, or council administrator, and there can also be a mayor, council administrator, or mayor, council.
Those are the big three. There's 2 or 3 more, but the 2 or 3 more aren't gonna work for us.
Then we get to talk about strong mayor, strong council, everything else, what we could potentially.
So now we're gonna have to find a different word than strong or weak.
Yeah,
Not a
because
good word.
people get really confused,
Yeah.
yeah.
The mayor.
So actually, as you said that, in the OML manual, it refers to it as a federal system. The mayor that has the veto power. It does not use the term strong mayor in the OML manual, it says federal system.
Would anyone be willing to take a stab at, so for citizen meetings, right, we need to figure out a timeline, when do we want to do this by? So we'll start setting up things like location, et cetera, advertising it, getting the word out, so just pure logistics. Then we also need to figure out actual presentation information itself, right? Here's what we want to present, how, PowerPoint, what have you. So I don't know if somebody wants to tackle all of those, if we want to break that up into 2 different things, what are your thoughts?
Could that be a subcommittee?
That's where I'm going.
Since I'm one of the people who continues to bring this up, I guess I better be on that stuff. And I'll take responsibility. But I'm not doing it by myself, so somebody help me.
Jen, I'll be happy to join you.
Oh, Rainey, you're so awesome.
And I'll bring you your certificate.
Oh, good.
Anyone else want to?
Oh,
Sorry?
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
You are. I agree with you. I don't think you should volunteer to do anything.
All right, so.
I'm on his committee, so I'm covered by him.
That's looking like a lawyer right there.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely, it is, 100%.
I can do anything.
All right, anybody else want to join that party? Well, they are still. Right? I'm just gonna do.
That's why we're autocorrect.
All right. We will take that offline as far as putting something together that's to present at least a plan by next meeting.
Yes,
It's a slippery slope to watch.
yes, it is.
Slippery slope.
Yes, yes.
They can turn quickly into mob rule, so they have to be very careful.
And I think we ought to, should we have someone other than us be a moderator?
Also, I was thinking, I don't know if that.
So
Background.
Is that a
Yes,
question for the
maybe.
subcommittee?
it is.
Okay.
Okay.
Well done.
There you go. Moving right along.
All right. Any other things that we have forgotten that have fallen off the agenda that we need to get back on there? No? And anything?
I'm trying to remember, do we have 1 or 2 more meetings this year?
That is a Great question. So the next meeting is the 20th.
I can't be here. You're in Michigan.
Okay.
Michigan.
I say that's pretty much when everyone's calendar starts falling
What
apart.
kind of island?
And I
And the 27th would be the next one, right?
Well, no, the 27th, I think we voted on.
So the 27th was the one that we said no,
Right.
and the 20th is the one we said yes.
Yes.
Okay. And then the 3rd, yes?
Okay, well,
Yes.
it's not noticed, it's not posted as of yet, but we just need to communicate that to the mayor to go up.
We should all be
January.
sober by then. That's exactly what I was
Well-
thinking. I'll be okay by then.
My other guests are meeting the second, so I might still be a little nut.
We'll never
And I don't drink, so
know. Perfect.
there we go.
So she can
I'll be done being lazy by then.
So no meeting, well, 27, meeting in January on the 3rd. And then what do we want to do in January? Do we like Thursday? Is this, we've got this time? and-
That's when we got the time,
Yeah,
so it's
this is
like,
still working, and I think, yeah, I just don't want to get into
Not
space
trying to change it.
negotiations.
I just want to make sure that we're not
Oh.
making anybody struggle, etc. Okay. And then, let's see, I'm gonna look at it under my action items to follow up with the mayor, the January dates posted. See right now. All right. The next section on our agenda is citizen feedback for all of our honored guests who have joined us. Eric, any feedback, thoughts, or brilliant input from you?
So I'm technically not a member of the public, but I'd be happy anytime that you would, well, I'm assigned here as staff, so the village is paying me my time to be here to support you in anything you need and to assist you. However, just, you guys are going to do great, I think. It's just, it'll be a process. My only advice on citizens, from what I've seen in many other public formats and meetings, is to definitely have a moderator that is not one of you. Definitely get yourself legal counsel as soon as possible. Very important, independent. And definitely have your first citizen meeting when it starts to warm up in March. That'll give you plenty of time. And you get more attendance. That's what I have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are you gonna be here every meeting then?
Oh, thank you. My son has hockey practice every other Thursday typically. So also in the cold months, he's 8:30 at Easton, so I typically won't be here on those nights. I will be here for the 3rd because he's off that week. And then I'll be here on the 10th, and then I'll just skip the next week. So I'll be here every other week, but anyone can reach out to me. I'll make sure my email's out to everyone.
So you're paid to sit here?
Yes.
So the village is paying you to
Yes.
sit here to provide advice to
Support.
us?
Whatever you may need of me,
Perfect.
you can ask any work of me, and if there's anything specific that's crazy. And
So if we ask for work for you that you can't do in this time, then you're charging the village for the additional time that you.
Anything, yeah. And
Are you a salary employee? I'm sorry.
No. I'm what you call permanent part-time. So it's one of those, long story short, and I can get off topic very quickly on this. So I'm part-time with the village, 20 hours, right? I have a full-time gig. So any hours you give me go against my 20 hours during the week. The mayor can authorize me to work more or less as necessary. And she wants to be supportive of this particular commission as well too. So if there's anything you need, if I see something that may get into a lot of hours, I'm going to let you know. And obviously I'll run it by the mayor, but most things are not going to be difficult, right? If you've got some work for me, I'll be happy to do it.
So in the 2 hours that you're here, if we had questions relating to, what is your planning?
Yeah, anything.
Planning expertise.
Happy to give you anything I can. I've done a lot of things over the years with different municipalities, so I'm happy to share that. And how they do it. Because any examples are going to be helpful to you as well, quite frankly.
And I don't mean to keep asking, but it's just if we could use it, I think that's a great idea while you're here.
I have a question
Yes.
regarding hiring an attorney. Do you want the 3 of us to just interview these people and determine who's best, or do you want to talk to any of them and have them come in?
Me personally, I'd love if the 3 of you came in with a recommendation, and we could just act upon that recommendation.
I'll second that. I'm not fishing, but.
Fine.
I gotta carefully bring this through. Anything else? All All right, so we're,
So once we adjourn, anybody who wants help getting into OneDrive, I'll sit here until we're all in. I have a question for Paul really quick. Ken had offered to help back me up on the website.
Yeah.
So if you want to stick around for a minute, I can set you up as an admin on that as well. Okay.
Okay, we're gonna, like a meeting.
Yeah.
all right.
Oh, you guys.
We adjourn.
I believe that is everything. That's
So-
meeting's the 20th, so.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
Thank you, Ryan, for all your technical help.
That's it, I'm the only one who watches.
I know you're involved, and then.
Uh,